Sweet. So what do you want to know?
Let's start with your name and a little bit about yourself.
Name's Issachar, but you can call me Char.
I'm Reuben. Sometimes my friends like to yell my name. It's a fun name to yell. Yeah, hey, Reuben!
Judah. It means praise in Hebrew, which you would think with a name like that, maybe, just maybe, folks would praise me more than little Jojo.
You call me Little Jojo. I can't stand when Judah does that. Though it's not as bad as some of the nicknames my other 9 older brothers call me. Name's Joseph, but you can call me Joe.
Reuben! It's a fun name to yell. Go ahead.
No thank you.
Suit yourself. A little bit about me. I'm the oldest of 12 brothers. So pretty much makes me number 1. I'm number 1. I'm number 1. Yeah.
I'm a bit of a middle child. There's a good amount of us who are middle children. So something I've done to express my uniqueness is I've grown out this rat tail. Pretty awesome, right?
I'm an important brother. I know that, and they know that, but they don't act like they know that. You know what I mean?
I don't think I know what you mean.
I'm the second to last brother, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of times I'm picked on. But you know, I try and hold my own. I bench daily, so that kind of helps.
Can you tell us about your shirt?
Oh, this thing? Yeah. It's pretty bright, isn't it? Dad gave it to me. One of the many reasons my brothers basically hate me.
That kid in his fancy smancy windbreaker gets whatever he wants just because he's Dad's favorite. And I don't even get started on his dreams.
Dreams?
Joey has got some nerve, that's for sure.
The nerve of that little dweeb.
First, he tells us that he has a dream that basically represents that one day all of us brothers are gonna bow down to him. I mean, can you imagine me, the oldest, numero uno, number 1, bowing to little Joey? I don't think so. At any rate, first he tells us brothers, and then he tells Dad that he has another dream that he and Mom will bow to.
Describe one of the dreams.
Cup of Joe was such an embarrassment. Here he was having all of us gathered around him, and he's telling us this dream where the sun, moon, and 11 stars all bowed down to him. I don't think I've ever seen Dad angrier at him than in that moment.
Epic. It was beautiful thing seeing Dad fume at him like that. Pretty sure there was smoke coming out of his ears. He rebuked a little Jojo. I mean, it was mad, but Dad was furious.
I don't get what the big deal was. I can't control my dream that God gave me. I'm just giving them a little look of what the future will most likely look like for them.
Seems like you cared more about getting your point across than caring how your dreams might make your family feel.
Well, yeah. They seem like important dreams that point to me ruling over them someday. Figure they should know, sooner than later.
That's a bit prideful, don't you think?
Nah.
Joey? Oh yeah, he's full of pride.
For being one of the youngest in the fam, he sure is gutsy. And I don't mean that as a compliment. The mouth on that kid, you know what I mean?
He needs to watch what he says if you catch my drift.
What exactly do you mean?
I mean, lots of accidents can happen when you tend sheep all by your lonesome.
Is something in your eye?
No, I'm alluding to the fact that me and the other bros have a plan on how to teach little Jojo a lesson.
Oh, I see.
We won't kill him or anything. We'll just put him in a hole for like a day or something.
I'm thinking of selling him, to be honest.
How do you feel about this statement? Healthy relationships start with me being a healthy person.
Start with you?
No, you.
Oh, because you said me. I thought you meant you.
Obviously not.
Right. So how do I feel about the phrase, healthy relationships start with me being a healthy person? Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent about that at this point in life. I mean, my brothers don't like me much, but I am my dad's favorite, so I've got that going for me relationship-wise.
I see.
Hey, do you ever feel like you have conflict in your relationships? I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical question because the answer is that we all have conflict. As long as we are human and we live on this earth, we are going to deal with conflict. The key from this talk is to learn how to have healthy conflict. That's to learn to grow and mature from conflict rather than letting it destroy us. We don't want it to lead to violence and murder even though we experience conflict. We want to be healthy in how we treat others and deal with conflict, to have healthy relationships with one another. And as we begin this teaching on conflict in families, we're going to be focusing on a person named Joseph. We find the account of his life in the book of Genesis, the first book in the Old Testament, which is the prelude to Jesus and his ministry on the earth. The result that we will see in Joseph's life is that he lived his dreams and ultimately had a healthy relationship with his families, but it took a long time and a healthy amount of conflict. So that's an innate desire that God has placed within us, to have healthy relationships, to have healthy families. And we can have that. But as followers of Jesus, we must live in obedience and be faithful, trusting and knowing that God will get the result he wants and has planned for our lives. And so we're beginning this new series called Dreams to Destinies. Joseph is famous for two dreams which you will see were kind of controversial to his family, but we see that these dreams led ultimately to Joseph living out his destiny. To start us off, let's look at what we're going to be looking at every single week of this series, our key verse for the series. And it comes from Genesis 50:20, first part of that verse. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. Now we're going to get to that a little bit later. A few years ago, a friend of mine and I went through a pretty real conflict, and that left us a little broken in our friendship. The problem, like most, stemmed from communication. I heard recently this tidbit that relationships are easy, you just have to be good at communicating, but good communication is super difficult. And that's so true. What we had was a failure to communicate, and that led to false assumptions and expectations that weren't met on both sides, which led naturally to conflict. Before we could get back to how things were, and honestly, to get to where things were better, we had to work through that conflict. Let's take a moment and share together some of the maybe challenges and conflicts we've had with our friends. The measure of health in our relationships always stems from our own health. It always goes back to what we talked about in another series, the idea of reaping and sowing. If we plant seeds that are cracked and broken and unhealthy, we're not going to yield a healthy crop. Healthy relationships start with me being a healthy person. So say that with me. Healthy relationships start with me being a healthy person. So the biggest question is, how do we lead from a healthy place in our relationships? Well, let's specifically look at the most important relationships that we have, those with our family. Every relationship and friendship and guardian, etc., has conflict. If we allow jealousy and selfishness to dictate how we deal with those conflicts, we're never going to have healthy relationships. We have to learn to love others even when we're having conflict with others, especially when it comes to our family relationships. The story of Joseph and his brothers is a picture of this for us. Ultimately, Joseph points to a much bigger picture too, Jesus. In fact, the beautiful thing about reading and studying the Old Testament is that it all points to Jesus. And the more that we read it, the more we understand about him. Yet Joseph is not Jesus. He's only human. And with all his faults, we can relate. And as we look to his example, we can grow to be more like Jesus. God made us to have relationships with one another. He wants us to have healthy relationships and productive relationships. And healthy relationships, remember, start with what? Being a healthy person. The first thing that we can remember when it comes to healthy conflict is this: make a difference, not a point. This is a great tension builder for how we tend to deal with conflict in relationships. See, it's easy to want to get our point across more than seeing the end result or even thinking about the other person. And I bet you can all think of someone who does this more than others, but we are all guilty of doing this. Instead, we should be making a difference in the person's life, ultimately leading us to have healthy relationships. Joseph's brothers hated him because of the relationship that he had with their dad. They were really close, and his father was not very subtle about how he felt about his favorite son. Imagine having like 11 other brothers, and there's this one that your dad goes on and on about how amazing they are. They're so talented. They always do the best. Like, we always give them the best things and all that stuff. And it can kind of feel a little bit weird, or like maybe there's some animosity towards there. And as God gives Joseph dreams of how God plans for Joseph to use his life and how he plans to use him in his life, Joseph may be falling into the same trap, trying to make a point to his brothers. And we see that it backfires on him. Let's read in Genesis. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Soon Joseph had another dream. This time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. We see that in Genesis 37 in verses 5 through 10 and some of the paraphrase of it. His father scolded him because of the way that he approached the situation. He was only trying to make a point, make himself look better, feel better, get back at them for something they did, because the way that Joseph came across, we see that his brothers end up not taking it very well. We ask ourselves, maybe things could have looked differently if Joseph had approached it differently. If instead of trying to make a point, he tried to make a difference. Remember, healthy relationships start with what? Me being a healthy person. We often focus on making a point over making a difference because we either think or perhaps even know we're right, yet we see clearly in the writings of Paul, we don't just speak the truth, but we speak the truth in love. And this is how we make a difference over just making a point. We see this in Ephesians 4. We will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of the body, the church. Ephesians 4:15. As Paul talks about this, we can see that this is a good measuring stick for how we are growing to be more like Jesus. How are you doing this? If Jesus is the bar to meet, how well are you doing? Honestly, on our own, we kind of fail. We get tired, we get cranky, we don't always prioritize saying the loving thing as opposed to the easy thing or the hurtful thing. And that's why it's important that we don't do this on our own. We have to continually ask God that through his spirit living in us, that we find the moments to speak in love. And when we find ourselves doing that more and more, we are actually finding ourselves becoming more and more like Jesus. The next thing we can remember is this: choose humility and let God do the honoring. Joseph elevated the conflict. The hatred and hostility of his brothers, he elevated it by how he told them about the dreams that God had given him, to the point that they wanted to kill him. We read this in Genesis. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him, they said. So when the Ishmaelites came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver, and the traders took him to Egypt. Genesis 37:23 through 28. I encourage you to read through the entire verses. We've kind of put them together so that it's easier to follow the story, but I really encourage you to go back and read that. But I want to give you a bit of context as to why it's so important. See, in that time, your identity was very much wrapped up in the way that you looked in your clothes. And not that you had to have the latest fashion trends, but the robe that Joseph wore would signify who he was. Imagine seeing someone walk up from really far away and immediately recognizing them because of like the robe that they're wearing, the jacket that they're wearing. And we do this still. If you see a person in like maybe a police uniform or army fatigues or a doctor's coat, we have a guess to their profession. But this was even more so back then. So when his brothers rip off his robe, they are essentially ripping off his identity. They wouldn't have been able to sell him into slavery if he had still had his identity. And this is a great reflection of what Jesus did for us. He was metaphorically stripped of his robe and identity. He took off his righteousness, being God in the flesh, and took on the robe of our sin, identifying himself with us. And that is why through our faith in him, we have a new identity. It was one of the ways that Jesus humbled himself. And look at what Jesus even says about humility, and because it was an important topic that he taught on. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Luke 14:11. He's saying, yeah, there are a lot of people who will probably tell you that you have to look better, that humility is a sign of weakness, or humility is all about making yourself look better even. And I would argue that there's a lot of false humility out there. But instead, Jesus says to humble ourselves and then let God do the honoring, not others. As we continue this series, we will be following Joseph's life through the book of Genesis. And we see God do the honoring and ultimately leads to Jesus. But as we wrap up today, here's the important stuff. First off, healthy relationships start with me being a healthy person. That's where it starts. It has to start with us becoming who God created us to be and living in that healthy space. And we do that by focusing on these three things. Make a difference, not a point. Ask yourself, how confident am I that I can listen to others without interjecting my own thoughts or ideas? And secondly, choose humility and let God do the honoring. Consider how you can do this in your life. Remember our one thing is healthy relationships start with me being a healthy person. So ask yourself this week, how can you re-examine and rework your relations with others so that you can avoid conflict? Maybe for you, the first thing you need to do is to lean into your own health. And there are a lot of us who find ourselves trying to help others more than really working on ourselves. And if that's you, I encourage you to lean into God this week. Ask him to reveal the areas of your life where you can grow and you can find healing. For some of you, this starts with a first-time decision to follow Jesus, putting your faith and trust in him. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to do just that. Let's go ahead and pray right now. We say, Jesus, thank you so much for your love and your humility and coming down and dying for us, Lord, for sacrificing yourself. We thank you for the examples that we can see and looking at the Old Testament, ways that we can have healthy conflict and healthy relationships. I ask that every single one of us, God, no matter where we are at in our walk or our faith, that you would help us to navigate the relationships in our lives, the ones that are there for us to grow in, our families, the people that love us and care for us, or the people that are surrounding us right now, that are being our families for us. God, we ask that in those relationships that we would learn to navigate them with a healthy heart, a healthy mind, and that we would work on our own health first and foremost, Lord, so that we can have healthy relationships. And if you're here and you've never made the decision to follow Jesus, then I want to invite you to do that with me right here, right now. Say, Jesus, I am not perfect. I have sinned and I have fallen short of you. But you came down, you humbled yourself and died on the cross for me. And you take my sin onto the cross with you, holding it against me no longer. And then you resurrected, and in your resurrection, you are inviting me into new life. A life built on you with new purpose and healing for who I am. I pray that today I would enter into that new relationship with you and find the healing and the new life that you have created me for. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.